It all begins when Javier plays one of his classic commercials from 1998 depicting the perfect family life for a job interview. The young recruiters are impressed with the work and how innovative it was for the time, but some elements are outdated. They request to see something more recent from his portfolio but are underwhelmed with what he presents. It was from his last job, which he left about a year ago. The interviewers conclude that he hasn't had work since that period, so he mustn't be really that sought after. They start by raving about his status in the advertisement industry and try to politely disqualify him as a prospect by saying that the vacancy is beneath someone of his level. The former executive is desperate for the job, so he brushes their compliments off, stating that he is willing to take the position. They are left with no other option but to tell him straight that his ideas are outdated and don't suit the agency's direction. He shows himself out, and as he passes through the office, the contrast between him and the workplace is obvious. He drives his very nice BMW to his home located at the upscale part of town. Upon arrival, you know this guy was making good money just from the view. Later that night, he has dinner with his wife Marga as their son plays his game console. She asks him about his recent job interview, but he tries to put on a strong front saying that it went well, but you know how ladies can smell the bull. She suggests that they downsize to a property that they own in a less prestigious part of town, but he is reluctant to do so. She explains that paying the rent of their current residence is killing them financially since Javier lost his job. The fancy BMW might have to go too, since they have a Fiat they can manage for now. The man tries to change the subject by seducing his wife, which totally works. A few days later, Javier decides to listen to his wife's advice to downsize. One morning he tries to assure his son that everything will be back to normal in no time. He will not have to change from his private school since they paid in advance. The kid would rather just switch to a public school now instead of delaying the inevitable. Javier is confused by that statement. His son reveals that everyone at school knows about their financial turmoil and make fun of him about it. It starts to rain later on in the day, so he offers to drop off their maid at the metro. Before she gets out of the car, he alerts her that they are moving, so they will have to terminate her contract since times are hard for them. She pleads, but when Javier asks for her set of keys, she gets annoyed and throws it at him before exiting the car. Moving day arrives and they pack their things from their luxury apartment into their normal one. The contrast is clear as he now has to manually pull the blinds to the view of a billboard of the city. As he continues to experience rejection interview after interview, Marga proves that she is not a gold digger and goes to find a job at a local retail store. Javier decides to enroll in some self-help class to make himself more employable. He lands another interview at an old friend's agency where he tries to impress. They offer him the job and the eager beaver says he can start right away. His friend leaves the meeting to take an important conference call. He leaves him to finalize the details with his assistant. Upon reviewing the contract, he realizes that it is basically a 6-month internship with no pay. Javier leaves the office frustrated about the big insult he just received. He snaps and kicks his own car door but shortly regrets it as he tries to fix the dents. While doing so, he finds the spare keys that the maid bounced off his head. That evening, he makes his way to his old home and watches the new family that have moved in. The following day, he makes his way there again and waits for the young couple to leave for work before sneaking inside the building. He almost gets caught entering when the neighbor's dog starts barking, but he makes it inside in time. Javier then proceeds to eat their cereal and take a dump in the toilet before looking around the house and the pictures of Thomas, his wife Laura, and their daughter Monica. He leaves quietly and later asks his son to go for a run with him so that they can bond, but due to his obesity he starts to vomit. When they return, Marga gets upset that he made their son vomit, which leads to an argument about her not alerting him that their son was getting bullied in school. She suggests he goes out and get some air, which he does, but he goes to his old house again. While watching, he receives a call from someone interested in buying the BMW, but he changes his mind about selling it. Day breaks and he infiltrates into the house again. This time around, he rummages through their things to find information about the family's lifestyle. Javier makes his way into Thomas's office and looks through his computer. He finds that the man has a drinking problem that caused him to get his family in a nasty car accident. He goes through Thomas's schedule and finds out that he goes to a support group at a church. He attends and infiltrates the group pretending to be someone struggling with drinking. Javier uses plot points from Thomas's own experiences to weave his backstory in order to get him to resonate, and it works. At the end of the session, Thomas comes to give him some words of encouragement. Javier uses it as an opportunity to establish a friendship with his target by asking him for a coffee. There he continues to flesh out his story, revealing that his wife and daughter left him because of his bad habits. This frees Thomas to also open up about some of his problems. Javier makes it home after his coffee date and his wife worriedly asks of his whereabouts. He makes up a lie about his class running late. Day breaks and this guy has made going to his ex-house a job because he's there again. This time he drops some minced meat on the floor before entering the building. After almost getting caught in the elevator, He makes his way inside the apartment where he messes with Thomas's schedule by moving Monica's gymnastics class to 1 hour later before syncing it across all his devices. He then looks outside where the noisy neighbor's dog lays dead. The minced meat was poisoned to get rid of any unpredictable variables. Javier later makes his way to a bar opposite Monica's gymnastic practice where he witnesses Lara berating Thomas for not coming at the right time to pick their daughter. He tries to explain but she doesn't listen as she drives off. In a moment of weakness, Thomas makes his way into the bar tempted to buy a drink but he restrains himself. Javier hides in a toilet thinking that his target came in because he saw him. At the support group meeting, Thomas talks again for the first time in 6 months and addresses how close he was to relapsing after the fight with his wife. Javier decides to follow up by thanking everyone for the support so far. When the meeting ends, the new friends go out for coffee again where Javier pries further into Thomas's fight with his wife while planting his own seeds into his head. After the chat he invites Javier for dinner the next day. The following evening, Javier makes his way to his old home officially this time. He rings Thomas's apartment intercom with flowers in hand. He answers and alerts him that he's coming. While waiting, the groundsman named Damien recognizes him and starts having small talk with him. He lies to the groundsman about the purpose of his visit, stating that he's there to pick up old letters and that the flowers are for his wife. Damien finds it a bit odd but plays along. Javier nervously watches as the elevator comes down, hoping that their conversation ends before Thomas shows up, and it does to his relief. Thomas welcomes him into the apartment and gives the old owner a tour of the place before they are interrupted by Lara. The two exchange pleasantries and the mother also introduces Monica, who he greets too. The adults have dinner together where they discuss various topics. After the food, Javier compliments Lara on supporting her husband during his recovery as he helps her load the dishes into the washer. She asks him about his family, and he brings out his fake story about a divorce which makes her feel guilty for asking. The following morning, Damien gives Monica a flower before asking Thomas about his interaction with his apartment's old tenant. Thomas explains that he is not aware about what he's talking about before leaving. Meanwhile, in an empty underground parking lot, Javier executes the next part of his plan by deliberately crashing his car. He calls Thomas pretending to be drunk. He rushes over to see him sitting in the passenger's seat with alcohol in his hand. He wrestles the bottle from Javier's hand, spilling some on himself in the process. Javier explains that seeing his happy family and success the previous night made him miss his own family, and as a result, he began to drink. Thomas uses his deadly allergy of peanuts as an analogy to explain how they should look at alcohol. He explains his job is given to him by his father-in-law who owns the company, so he doesn't really have freedom. Javier pretends that his phone is dead, which is why he hasn't called a tow truck. So Thomas gives him his phone to call one while he goes out to clean himself. Javier uses this as an opportunity to send an email to himself before calling the towing company. He asks Thomas to not inform Lara about what happened. When Javier returns home, he lies to his wife that he has sold the car and the money should reflect in the coming days. He excuses himself when he receives a call from Damien. The groundsman alerts him that he knows and wants to meet to discuss something with him. In the interim, Lara smells the alcohol on her husband's shirt and fears that he has relapsed, so she confronts him about it. He comes clean about the situation with Javier, which calms the tension. The following day, the washed-up executive meets Damien at a zoo where he blackmails him to retrieve something very disgusting from Thomas's house. He makes his way to the house and picks what he has been told to retrieve. Lara comes back home unexpectedly as she forgot her phone. Unlucky for Javier, she calls his phone as she wants to meet with him. She hears a phone buzzing, so she gets freaked out and starts looking around, but he silences it and hides so he doesn't get caught. He later responds to her voicemail and meets up with her at a coffee shop where she tries to politely warn him to cut his friendship with her husband. Lara informs him that she knows about his incident and that he asked Thomas to lie to her. Javier twists everything on Thomas, stating that her husband has relapsed and is lying. It was rather him that was drunk. He shows her the email that he sent from Thomas's phone, which makes it look like her husband is drinking again. Javier later watches his handiwork as the young couple argue in their balcony. Thomas calls him, but he ignores it. Later on, he receives a package with 2 cans of pepper spray. He injects one with a substance before throwing the evidence away, but Marga notices. He sets off to meet Damien but takes a detour to his night class when he notices that his wife is tailing him. He stays there long enough for her to leave to his relief. The following morning, he meets up with a weird groundsman. He hands over the package and tries to leave, but Damien asks him to put a camera in the house. He's reluctant but takes it. Javier gets fed up with the groundsman's sick preferences, so he sabotages his leaf blower. When he uses it, the machine ignites, burning him severely. During that time, Javier makes his way to Thomas's office and shows his true nature by revealing that he did lie about everything, which causes Thomas to attack him. He takes his battered face to Lara's apartment. Around this time, Damien is getting rushed to the hospital for his burns. He uses the attack on him to further solidify the narrative that Thomas is an unhinged drunk. As Lara tends to his wounds, he plants the seed that her husband thinks that they are having an affair. After finding out that Thomas has moved out temporarily, he gives her the chemically injected pepper spray to protect herself just in case her violent husband comes. She's reluctant at first but accepts it. Javier quietly walks into his house and starts packing his things before leaving his family with his wife speechless. He checks into a hotel where he calls Lara to alert her that he can get Monica some one-on-one time with her favorite gymnast. She agrees, so they go and have a good time watching her hero perform. He gets a group picture and sends it to Thomas, which makes him livid. The roles have reversed as it is now Thomas that watches from a distance while Javier is close to the family as he hands a sleepy Monica over to her mother before leaving. Soon after, a drunken Thomas barges into the apartment as Lara pleads for him to get out. She put Monica in her room before confronting her husband. He tries to explain that Javier is manipulating them, but the way he has presented himself, she doesn't believe him. He grabs her aggressively to try and get his point across, so she uses the pepper spray on him. She quickly realizes something is wrong when he starts to choke. He falls to the floor and stops breathing for some time. She frantically calls Javier for help, who was outside the whole time. He makes his way up to comfort Lara before calmly asking her to go inside the room with her daughter. He calls the police while he switches the pepper spray to a normal one. Thomas regains consciousness to Javier's surprise, but he whispers to him before smothering him to death. The killer goes into the room to hug the family of the man he just killed. Later, Javier drops Monica off at school in a new BMW before heading to work at the place that gave him that shocking offer. But from his interaction with his friend, he now has a senior role at the agency. They discuss an upcoming sales pitch to his father-in-law, but they are interrupted by a call that Marga wants to see him. He somehow managed to marry Lara. Javier goes to meet her where his ex-wife reveals that she has been studying the case and knows that he killed Thomas by injecting peanut extract into the pepper spray. She threatens to go to the police, but he counters by saying he will remove all of their son's benefit, and will put them on the street since he owns the house that they stay in. He leaves her speechless for the second time. After a successful meeting, he makes his way to his beauty house, embraces his new wife, and eats dinner with his stolen family. Javier stands at the backyard window as the blinds reveal his perfectly manicured landscaped garden. The whole sequence mimics his classic advertisement that made him so famous. That brings the movie to an end. Don't forget to subscribe for more.